Two little twins snuck into a luxurious party to sell cookies and buy medicine for their sick grandma. But when the young billionaire notices them, he stops everything and makes an announcement that leaves everyone speechless. The sun had barely risen when two tiny figures emerged from the shadows of a worn-out building in the heart of the city. Amy and Lisa, 5-year-old identical twins with golden curls framing their angelic faces and blue eyes shining like sapphires, walked hand in hand, carrying baskets draped with colorful cloths. Their steps were light, but their hearts were heavy with a mission that seemed far too big for their small shoulders. "Amy, do you think we can do this?" Lisa whispered, squeezing her sister's hand. Amy, always the braver of the two, nodded with determination. "We have to, Lisa, for Grandma Betty." The girls cast one last glance at the apartment on the 3rd floor, where their Grandma Betty, 65, slept a restless sleep. The sweet smell of freshly baked cookies still lingered in the air, mixed with the bitter aroma of medicine and worry. As they walked through streets that were just beginning to stir, the twins recalled the events that had led them to this unlikely journey. Only a week ago, their lives were simple, filled with laughter, playtime, and the unconditional love of their Grandma Betty. Betty was more than just their guardian. She was their entire world. Since the girls' parents had left, something Betty always avoided discussing, her eyes filling with deep sadness whenever it came up, she had become mother, father, and grandmother to Amy and Lisa. With hands wrinkled by time yet gentle and skillful, Betty fed them, clothed them, and above all filled their lives with love. The small apartment they called home was a cozy haven, always perfumed by the aroma of freshly baked cookies. Betty was famous throughout the neighborhood for her secret recipes, passed down from generation to generation. "The secret," she would always say with a mischievous smile, "is adding a pinch of love to every batch." The twins had grown up watching Betty work her magic in the tiny kitchen, turning simple ingredients into treats that lit up people's eyes with joy. It was natural, then, that when Betty started coughing and could no longer get out of bed with her usual energy, Amy and Lisa took over the kitchen. In the beginning, it was just a game. The girls wore aprons far too big for their small bodies, climbed onto stools to reach the counter, and tongues sticking out in concentration, tried to recreate Betty's recipes. The first results were disastrous. Burnt cookies, sticky dough, and a kitchen that looked like it had been hit by a flour tornado. But Betty, even while sick, encouraged them with kind words and whispered tips from her bedroom. "More love, my little ones, always more love." Over time, the twins' skills improved. Neighbors, who initially bought the cookies out of pity for the poor little orphans with their sick grandmother, soon found themselves addicted to the girls' creations. Amy and Lisa established a routine. In the morning, they helped Betty with her medicine and care. In the afternoon, they baked cookies. And on weekends, they set up a small makeshift stand on the sidewalk in front of their building. The twins' cookie business became a local attraction. People lined up to buy the twins' delights, as the cookies came to be known. Amy and Lisa took turns. While one handled sales with an adorable smile, the other ran upstairs to check on Betty and bring down fresh cookies. For a while, it seemed everything would be fine. The cookie money helped pay for Betty's medicine, and the girls dreamed of the day they could take Grandma to a picnic in the park, like in the old days. But then, on a sunny afternoon that started like any other, the twins' world fell apart. Amy was in the kitchen, putting a new batch of chocolate cookies in the oven, when she heard a sound that froze her blood. It was a sound she and Lisa feared more than anything else in the world: Betty's cough. It wasn't the usual cough, the one they had grown accustomed to hearing over the past few weeks. It was something different, deeper, more desperate. Amy dropped everything and ran to the bedroom, Lisa right behind her, abandoning her post at the cookie stand outside. What they saw left them paralyzed with fear. Betty was sitting up in bed, her frail body shaking violently with each cough. Her face, normally rosy and full of life, was pale and contorted in pain. But what scared the girls most was the color red. Red on Betty's lips, red on the handkerchief she held to her mouth, red dripping from her trembling fingers. "Grandma!" they shouted in unison, running to the bed. Betty tried to smile, but another coughing fit stopped her. The girls, tears in their eyes, did what they could. Amy ran to get water while Lisa held her grandmother's hand, whispering words of comfort she herself barely believed. It was Lisa who had the presence of mind to call for help. With shaky hands, she picked up the old phone on the nightstand and dialed the number Betty had made them memorize for emergencies. What followed was a blur of sirens, paramedics rushing in, and Betty being carried away on a stretcher, looking smaller and more fragile than the girls had ever seen her. Amy and Lisa, holding hands, followed the ambulance to the hospital in a taxi, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. At the hospital, the hours dragged on like years. The twins, sitting in chairs too big for them in the waiting room, watched doctors and nurses come and go, each unfamiliar face increasing their anxiety. They clung to each other, their young minds struggling to grasp the seriousness of the situation. Finally, a man in a white coat with a serious expression approached them. Introducing himself as Dr. Smith, he knelt in front of the girls, his eyes kind but worried. "Amy, Lisa," he began, his voice gentle, "your grandma is very sick. She needs special treatment to get better." The twins nodded, their wide blue eyes fixed on the doctor. "But she'll be okay, right?" Amy asked, her voice trembling slightly. Dr. Smith hesitated, and in that moment of silence, the girls felt the weight of the world crash down on their small shoulders. "She can get better, yes," he finally said, "but the treatment she needs is very expensive." "How much?" Lisa whispered, squeezing her sister's hand. $50,000, the doctor replied, reluctance clear in his voice. For Amy and Lisa, $50,000 was an incomprehensible sum. It was more money than they had ever seen or imagined in their short lives. It was a number that made their stomachs drop and their hopes waver. That night, back in the silent apartment devoid of Betty's comforting presence, the twins sat on their grandma's bed, huddled together, lost in thought. The familiar scent of Betty on the pillow was both a comfort and a painful reminder of all that was at stake. "What are we going to do, Amy?" Lisa asked, her voice small in the darkness of the room. Amy, always the leader, the protector, felt the weight of responsibility like never before. She looked out the window at the city lights twinkling like distant stars. Then her eyes fell on a colorful poster stuck to a lamppost across the street. Even from a distance, the gold letters shone. "Annual Grand Ball at the Anderson Mansion tonight." Suddenly, a crazy, risky, but hopeful idea sprang to Amy's mind. "Lisa," she exclaimed, turning to her sister with shining eyes, "what if we sell our cookies at the Anderson party? There must be lots of rich people there. Maybe we can get the money for Grandma Betty." Lisa's eyes widened, a mixture of fear and excitement on her face. "But Amy, how are we going to get in? It's a fancy party." "I don't know yet," Amy admitted, "but we have to try. For Grandma." The plan was bold, almost impossible for two 5-year-old girls. But at that moment, with despair fueling their courage, it seemed like their only hope. The following hours were a whirlwind of activity. The twins worked tirelessly in the kitchen, mixing, baking, decorating. They used every bit of flour, every pinch of sugar they found in the cupboards. And in each cookie, they put not only Betty's secret ingredients, but all the love and hope their little hearts could hold. When the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Amy and Lisa were exhausted but determined. Dozens of perfect cookies were piled in baskets, ready to be sold. The girls looked at each other, their faces smudged with flour and chocolate, but their eyes shining with purpose. "Let's get ready," Amy said, leading the way to the small wardrobe they shared. They put on their best dresses, last year's Christmas gifts, already a bit short and worn but still pretty. Amy chose the sky blue one that matched her eyes, while Lisa picked pale pink. They carefully braided each other's hair, just as Betty had taught them. Before leaving, Amy took a piece of paper and a pencil. Tongue tucked between her teeth in concentration, she wrote carefully, "We went to sell cookies in the park. We'll be back soon." It was a small lie, but they didn't want to worry the neighbors who occasionally checked on the apartment. With baskets of cookies in hand and hearts full of determination, Amy and Lisa took one last look at the apartment. The silence was oppressive, Betty's absence almost palpable. "We'll help Grandma," Amy said, her voice firm despite the fear she felt. Lisa nodded, gripping her sister's hand. "Together," she replied. And so the tiny cookie sellers set off at dawn, two small figures against the skyline of a waking city. Their destination, the Anderson mansion, where they hoped to find salvation for their beloved grandmother. As they walked, the empty streets echoed with the sound of their determined footsteps. Amy and Lisa had no idea what challenges lay ahead, the dangers of their audacious plan. They only knew Betty needed them, and they would do anything to save her. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows before them, as though pointing the way. And somewhere in a hospital room, Betty slept a restless sleep, unaware of the act of love and courage her granddaughters were about to undertake. Amy and Lisa's journey had only just begun, but it was already a story of love, hope, and the incredible power of two small hearts determined to do the impossible. As they approached the wealthier parts of the city, the twins had no idea how much their lives were about to change forever. With determined steps, Amy and Lisa continued on their way to the Anderson mansion. The sun was now high in the sky, and the city's streets were coming to life with the buzz of a new day. The twins walked with purpose, their cookie baskets swinging gently with each step. As they left their familiar neighborhood behind, the scenery around them began to change. Narrow streets and cramped buildings gave way to wide avenues and imposing houses. Amy and Lisa looked in awe at the manicured lawns and luxurious cars passing by. "Amy," Lisa whispered, squeezing her sister's hand, "do you think we're close?" Amy swallowed hard, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. "I think so, Lisa. Remember what Grandma Betty always said about the Anderson mansion? That it was so big it looked like a fairy tale castle." Amy's words had barely left her lips when, rounding a corner, they saw it. The Anderson mansion rose majestically at the end of the street, its tall spires and gleaming windows seeming to challenge the very sky. The ornate iron gate, formidable and embellished, looked like an impenetrable barrier for the tiny cookie sellers. For a moment, the twins stopped, intimidated by the grandeur before them. The reality of their bold plan finally hit them with full force. They were just two 5-year-old girls, alone in a world of adults, trying to do the impossible. Lisa looked at Amy, her blue eyes filled with doubt. "What if we can't get in?" Amy took a deep breath, summoning all the courage she had. She thought of Betty, alone in a hospital room, needing them. "We'll make it, Lisa. We have to, for Grandma." With renewed determination, the twins approached the gate. They could hear the distant sound of music and laughter coming from the mansion. The party had already started. Standing in front of the gate, Amy and Lisa looked at each other one last time. In that glance, they shared all the love, fear, and hope they felt. Then, with trembling hands, Amy reached out and pressed the doorbell. The sound echoed, seeming to resonate not just through the property, but through the girls' hearts. There was no turning back now. Their fate, and Betty's, depended on what happened next. As they waited, the twins clung to each other's hands, their cookie baskets fragile shields against the unknown world that lay ahead. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Amy and Lisa were ready to face any challenge that came their way, together, for the love of their grandma. And so, with hearts pounding and unshakable hope, the little cookie sellers waited for the moment that would change their lives forever. The twins' hearts pounded as they stood before the towering gate of the Anderson mansion. The sound of the doorbell still rang in their ears when, to their surprise, the gate began to open slowly, with no one appearing to greet them. Amy and Lisa exchanged nervous looks, but determination shone in their blue eyes. It was now or never. With hesitant steps, the girls passed through the gate, entering the mansion's vast gardens. The contrast with their little apartment was shocking. Expansive green lawns stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with exotic flower beds and ornate fountains. The stone path beneath their feet seemed to whisper tales of grand parties and lavish lifestyles they could only imagine. As they walked, Amy and Lisa felt like intruders in a fairy tale world. Their cookie baskets, filled with so much love and hope, now seemed out of place in this setting of opulence. But the thought of their grandma, alone in a hospital bed, propelled them onward. As they approached the mansion, the sound of music and laughter grew louder. The warm, inviting glow from the enormous windows illuminated the night sky. The twins hid behind a neatly trimmed bush, peering in amazement at the scene unfolding before them. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, they could see the mansion's interior. The main hall was a spectacle of elegance and extravagance. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting thousands of points of light over guests in elegant attire. Women in evening gowns glided across the marble floor, their diamond necklaces sparkling with every movement. Men in impeccable suits stood in groups, champagne glasses in hand. "Amy," Lisa whispered, her eyes wide with awe. "How are we going to get in there? We don't belong in this place." Amy swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility. She knew Lisa was right, but she also knew they couldn't give up now. "Let's go around," she decided, pulling her sister by the hand. There must be a back entrance. The twins circled around the mansion, staying in the shadows to avoid being seen. When they reached the back, they saw a huge, bustling kitchen in full swing. A door was open, letting in the cool night air. Amy and Lisa exchanged looks, a silent plan forming between them. With a nod, they waited for the right moment and, when no one was looking, slipped inside the kitchen. The heat and aromas hit them like a wave. It was chaotic, yet somehow organized. Chefs shouted orders, pans hissed over the fire, and the rapid clatter of knives formed a culinary symphony. For a moment, the twins stood frozen, overwhelmed by the flurry around them. Taking advantage of the confusion, Amy pulled Lisa behind a large dessert cart. "Let's wait here," she whispered. "When someone goes out to the hall, we'll follow." The girls waited, their hearts thudding wildly. Finally, they saw a waiter pick up a tray of canapes and head toward a door leading to the main hall. Exchanging determined glances, they discreetly followed him. The grandeur of the hall was even more impressive up close. The twins felt minuscule amidst the luxury and elegance surrounding them. For a moment, they froze, intimidated by the crowd of well-dressed adults. But then, Amy felt Lisa squeeze her hand, and that was all she needed to remember why they were there. With determined steps, they began weaving through the guests. "Cookie, sir, cookie, ma'am." Their soft voices rose above the party's din. "Please buy our cookies. Our grandma needs medicine." The guests' initial reaction was surprise. Two small children, clearly out of place in that luxurious setting, selling homemade cookies. It was unusual, to say the least. But as the twins continued through the hall, something began to change. The guests' faces, initially marked by surprise and even distrust, started to soften. The innocent blue eyes of Amy and Lisa, their simple yet carefully arranged dresses, and the touching story of their sick grandma began to melt even the hardest hearts. An elegant lady wearing a pearl necklace, likely worth more than the girl's entire apartment, was the first to give in. "Oh, my darlings," she said softly, "of course I'll buy some of your cookies. Such a noble cause." She took out a $100 bill from her purse. "Keep the change, my little ones." That gesture seemed to open the floodgates. Soon, other guests were gathering, drawn by the novelty and touched by the twins' story. Businessmen pulled out bills from their wallets, and ladies removed jewelry to exchange for cookies. Amy and Lisa could hardly believe what was happening. "Amy," Lisa whispered between sales, "do you think we'll raise enough for Grandma?" Amy looked at the small fortune they had already collected and felt a surge of hope. "Let's keep trying, Lisa. We can't stop now." As the twins continued their improbable mission, they failed to notice that someone was watching them. From across the hall, a tall, well-dressed man observed them with growing interest. Jack Anderson, the party's host and heir to the Anderson Empire, couldn't take his eyes off the little cookie sellers. At first, Jack was intrigued by the children's unexpected presence at his party. How did they get in? What were they doing here? But as he watched them interact with the guests, offering cookies with both determination and innocence, something inside him stirred. Jack was known for his business acumen and his ability to read people, a skill that had propelled him to the top of the corporate world by the age of 30. But now, watching these two girls, he felt touched in a way he hadn't in years. There was an authenticity in their actions, a purity of purpose that contrasted sharply with the world of calculated business deals and superficial relationships to which he was accustomed. Jack saw how they worked in perfect sync, communicating with just a glance. How they approached each guest with a mix of hope and resolve that was impossible to ignore. Curious, Jack approached a group that had just bought cookies from the twins. Taking one, he examined it for a moment before taking a bite. The taste hit him like a wave of nostalgia. It was sweet, yes, but with a complexity that spoke of love and tradition. For a moment, Jack was transported back to his own childhood, to moments in the mansion's kitchen he had long forgotten. Memories flooded his mind, the smell of cookies baking, the sound of laughter in the kitchen, the taste of love in every bite. For a brief instant, Jack was no longer the powerful businessman. He was a little boy who used to hide in the kitchen, begging for just one more cookie. Shaking off these thoughts, Jack decided to approach the twins. He observed them for a few more minutes, noting how they interacted with the guests, how they explained their cause with surprising eloquence for children so young. "Hello, girls," he said softly, kneeling down to their eye level. "Are you enjoying the party?" Amy and Lisa turned, surprised to see the elegant man speaking to them. There was something in his eyes, a kindness that made them feel a little less out of place. "Yes, sir," Amy replied, as usual taking on the role of spokesperson. "It's a very beautiful party," Jack smiled. "Thank you. I'm Jack Anderson, the host. May I ask what brings two young ladies like you to my party?" The twins exchanged a quick glance before Lisa answered. "We're selling cookies, Mr. Anderson. Our grandma is very sick and needs expensive treatment." Jack felt a pang in his heart. The sincerity in the girl's eyes was undeniable. "I see. And how much do you need?" $50,000, Amy replied, her voice trembling slightly at the still impossible number. Jack felt his heart tighten. The determination in the girl's eyes, mingled with barely contained desperation, deeply moved him. He could see that it wasn't a made-up story to gain sympathy. Their fear and hope were far too real to be faked. "That's quite a sum," Jack commented gently. "You must love your grandma very much to undertake such a mission." Amy's eyes filled with tears. "She's all we have, Mr. Anderson. She taught us everything we know. Now it's our turn to take care of her." In that moment, something changed inside Jack. The purity of these children's love for their grandmother, the courage of two little girls facing a world of adults to save someone they cherished, touched a part of him that had been dormant for a long time. Jack remembered his own childhood, the precious moments with people who truly cared about him, not his name or his fortune. He thought of how his life had become an endless series of deals, contracts, and empty parties. And here were these two children, reminding him what truly mattered in life. An idea began to form in his mind, crazy, impulsive, but it felt absolutely right. "Girls, he said, a new sparkle in his eyes. "Do you trust me?" Amy and Lisa looked at each other, uncertain, but something about Jack's expression made them nod. "Great. Stay right here for a moment, okay?" With that, Jack stood up and headed to the small stage where the band was playing. He whispered something to the band leader, who nodded and signaled for the music to stop. The sudden silence made all the guests turn to the stage, where Jack now stood with a microphone in hand. His heart pounded, not from the usual nerves of public speaking, something he was quite used to, but from the emotion of what he was about to do. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice resonated through the hall, "I apologize for interrupting the festivities, but I have an important announcement to make." He paused, his eyes finding Amy and Lisa in the crowd. "Tonight, we have some very special guests among us, two young entrepreneurs on a mission of love." A murmur of curiosity rippled through the crowd. Jack motioned for the twins to come up on stage. Hesitant, Amy and Lisa walked through the hall, all eyes on them. When they reached the foot of the stage, Jack extended a hand to help them up. "These are Amy and Lisa," Jack continued, gently placing his hands on the girls' shoulders. "They're here tonight selling the most delicious cookies I've ever tasted, all to help their sick grandma." Jack looked at the surprised faces of his guests. He saw curiosity, confusion, and on some, a flicker of empathy and understanding. "I know many of you must be wondering what two children are doing at our party. I confess I was intrigued myself when I saw them." But after talking to them, after hearing their story, I realized they bring us a valuable lesson tonight. He paused, letting his words sink in. We live in a world of business deals, transactions, numbers on spreadsheets. But these girls remind us what truly matters: love, family, and the willingness to do anything for those we hold dear. Jack felt his voice tremble slightly with emotion. He noticed some guests exchanging surprised looks. Jack Anderson, the corporate shark, showing emotion. Amy and Lisa need $50,000 for their grandma's treatment. For many of us here, that amount wouldn't significantly change our lives, but for them and for their grandmother, it means everything. He glanced at the girls, seeing the mix of hope and fear in their eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, I propose we turn this party into something more meaningful. Let's have a charity auction. A ripple of excitement passed through the crowd. Jack smiled, sensing he had captured everyone's attention. Each cookie will be auctioned individually, and to make things even more interesting, I promise to personally match each winning bid. All the money raised will go directly to their grandma's treatment. Amy and Lisa looked at Jack with a mix of shock and gratitude. They could hardly believe what was happening. What had begun as a desperate, improbable mission was suddenly turning into something much bigger. But before we begin, Jack continued, I'd like us all to reflect on what these girls are teaching us: courage, unconditional love, and doing the impossible for those we love. May we all leave here tonight not only having contributed to a noble cause, but also having learned a valuable lesson about what really matters in life. With those words, Jack kicked off the auction. The excitement in the room was palpable. The first cookie was sold for $1,000, a sum that made the twins gasp in surprise, but it was just the beginning. As the night went on, the bids got higher and higher. Guests who normally spent fortunes on art or jewelry were now fiercely competing for simple homemade cookies. Jack watched it all with a smile, occasionally stirring excitement with witty remarks. But part of his mind was elsewhere. The more he heard Amy and Lisa speak, the more familiar their accents seemed. It was an accent he hadn't heard in years, but one deeply etched in his childhood memories. Flashbacks of the old kitchen in the mansion began surfacing in his mind, the smell of cinnamon and vanilla in the air, the sound of a warm laugh, the taste of freshly baked cookies, and a voice that hummed softly as she worked, with the same accent he now heard. While the auction continued, Jack approached the twins again. Girls, he said quietly, you mentioned your grandma made these cookies, right? Amy nodded enthusiastically. Yes, our grandma is the best cook in the world. She always says the secret is adding a pinch of love to every batch. Those words hit Jack like lightning. He had heard them before, long ago, from a woman who had been like a second mother to him. A suspicion began to form in his mind, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the moment at hand. The auction went on late into the night, the energy in the room never waning. Guests who had arrived expecting a night of superficial socializing found themselves deeply moved by the twins' story and by the generous spirit Jack had ignited. Finally, when the last cookie was sold, the accountant announced the total amount raised. Ladies and gentlemen, the accountant's voice echoed through the hall, it is my great pleasure to announce that, with Mr. Anderson's matching contributions, we have just surpassed $200,000 in donations. The crowd broke into applause. Amy and Lisa hugged each other, tears of joy and relief streaming down their faces. They had done it, raised not just enough for Betty's treatment, but so much more. Jack watched the girls, a mixture of emotions crossing his face. Their joy was contagious, yet the questions in his mind wouldn't let him rest. There was something more to this story, something he needed to find out. Resolute, Jack approached the twins again. Amy, Lisa, he said gently, you've done something incredible tonight. But I'd like to know more about your grandma. May I accompany you home? I'd like to meet her in person. The girls exchanged surprised looks, but gratitude shone in their eyes. Sure, Mr. Anderson, Amy replied. Grandma will be so happy. While the party continued around them, Jack made quick arrangements for someone to take over his hosting duties. He had a mystery to solve, a story to uncover. Something told him this journey was only just beginning. Leaving the mansion with Amy and Lisa, Jack felt a mix of emotions he hadn't felt in years: excitement, nervousness, and a strange sense that he was about to rediscover a part of himself he had long forgotten. The twins, exhausted but glowing, walked beside him, their small hands holding his. The contrast between their lives could not have been more stark. But at that moment, united by an act of generosity and by the mystery that lay ahead, they were simply three people embarking on a journey into the unknown. As they left the illuminated mansion behind, Jack looked up at the starry sky, sensing that his life was about to change in unimaginable ways. The auction had been just the beginning. The real challenge, the real adventure was only just beginning. And so, under the cover of night, the billionaire and the two little cookie sellers departed, leaving behind a transformed party and heading toward an uncertain but hope-filled future. Night had long since fallen when the taxi finally stopped in front of a modest building on the outskirts of the city. Jack Anderson, still dressed in his elegant party suit, looked out of place against the backdrop of narrow streets and run-down buildings. Amy and Lisa, tired but with bright, excited eyes, jumped out as soon as the car stopped. "This is it, Mr. Anderson," Amy exclaimed, pointing to the brick building with a facade that had seen better days. Jack paid the driver, giving him a generous tip that made the man widen his eyes in surprise. As the taxi drove away, Jack found himself standing on the cracked sidewalk, staring at the building that held a mystery. He could not wait to unravel. The twins led him through the dimly lit entrance and up the creaking stairs. The contrast with the luxurious mansion they had left behind could not have been more striking. Each step seemed to carry Jack further from his opulent world and closer to a reality he had long forgotten. On the third floor, Amy pulled a key out of the pocket of her worn dress and opened the door to a small apartment. The smell of cookies still hung in the air, now mingled with the odor of medicine and something else, something familiar that Jack couldn't quite identify. "Grandma," Lisa called softly, "we're home." "And we brought a visitor." A faint sound came from one of the rooms, and the girls guided Jack there. That was when he saw her, and the world seemed to stop for a moment. Lying in a simple bed, covered with a threadbare but clean quilt, was Betty. Her face was pale and lined with fatigue, but her eyes, the eyes Jack remembered so well from his childhood, still sparkled with an inner strength that even illness couldn't dim. For a moment, no one moved. The air in the little room seemed charged with electricity, with unspoken memories and long-buried emotions. "Jack," Betty's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried a blend of surprise, fear, and something that sounded almost like hope. Jack felt his legs weaken. He leaned against the wall, his eyes never leaving Betty's face. "Yes, Betty, it's me." The twins looked from one to the other, confusion evident on their small faces. "Grandma," Amy asked hesitantly, "do you know Mr. Anderson?" Betty tried to sit up, but a coughing fit stopped her. Jack instinctively moved to help, supporting her back and adjusting the pillows. That familiar touch, even after so many years, sent a wave of emotion through both of them. "Thank you," Betty murmured, trying to catch her breath. She looked at her granddaughters with a weak smile, but her gaze never fully left Jack's face. "Yes, darlings. Mr. Anderson, Jack, was just a boy when I worked at his parents' mansion." Jack sat on the edge of the bed, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone in the room could hear it. "Betty, I had no idea. All these years." Betty tried to mask the emotion in her voice, but her eyes betrayed her. Years of fear, longing, and guarded secrets overflowed in that look. "Did the girls manage to sell some cookies, Jack? I hope they didn't cause trouble at your party." Jack laughed, a sound mixed with what was almost a sob. "Trouble? Betty? They were the stars of the night. We held an auction and—" He paused, looking at Amy and Lisa, who watched the scene with wide eyes. "Girls, why don't you go to the kitchen and make us some tea? I'm sure your grandma would love that." The twins nodded, sensing instinctively that the adults needed a moment alone. As soon as the door closed behind them, Jack turned back to Betty, his emotions raw. "Betty, why did you never look for me? All these years, if I had known—" Betty closed her eyes for a moment, as though gathering her strength to face a past she had so desperately tried to bury. When she opened them again, Jack saw a mixture of sadness, fear, and the fierce determination he remembered from his childhood. Jack, there are things you don't know. Things that happened that last night in the mansion. Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. He vaguely remembered a day when Betty simply never came back to work. His father had said she resigned, but something had never felt right about that story. Now, sitting in this small, modest room, so far from the world he knew, Jack felt he was about to uncover a truth that could change everything. What happened, Betty? Please, tell me. Betty hesitated, years of fear and silence weighing on her. But something in Jack's expression, a mix of genuine concern and determination, made her continue. She began to speak, her voice low but firm, transporting both of them back to that fateful night 20 years ago. It was late. I was finishing cleaning the kitchen when I heard voices coming from your father's office. The door was slightly open, and I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but... Betty closed her eyes again, reliving the scene as though it were yesterday. Jack could almost see the reflection of that night in her eyes, the fear and uncertainty she must have felt. Your father was on the phone with someone. He sounded agitated, nervous. I heard words like fraud, millions, and hide the evidence. Jack, he was discussing a massive financial scam. Jack felt as though the ground had been pulled from under him. His father, Robert Anderson, had always been his hero, a model of business integrity. The thought that he could be involved in something so sordid was almost inconceivable. I was frozen, Jack. I didn't know what to do. Then I tripped over a bucket, making a noise. Your father came out of the office and saw me there. He was furious. Betty trembled at the memory, and Jack instinctively took her hand, offering comfort. The touch seemed to give Betty the strength to go on. He fired me on the spot, said if I spoke a word about what I'd heard, he'd make sure I never worked anywhere again, that he had the power to destroy my life and anyone I cared about. Jack felt a wave of nausea. His childhood memories, those happy moments with his father, now seemed tainted by this revelation. Betty, I had no idea. My God, I'm so sorry. Betty reached out, gently touching Jack's face as she used to when he was a little boy. It's not your fault, dear. You were just a child, but I was scared for my future, scared for my granddaughters I had just adopted. So I ran. I moved away, changed my name. I lived all these years afraid he would find me. Jack held Betty's trembling hand, looking around the small room at the few belongings and photos of the twins at various ages. An entire life lived in fear and hiding because of his father's actions. Betty, this ends today. I'll take care of you and the girls. I'll pay for your treatment, for everything you need. Betty tried to protest, but Jack gently cut her off. No, please. Let me do this. Not just because of what my father did, but because of everything you meant to me when I was a boy. You were more of a mother to me than my own mother ever was. Tears began to stream down Betty's face, and Jack felt his own eyes filling with tears. Oh, Jack, my dear boy, you've grown into a wonderful man. At that moment, Amy and Lisa returned with a tray of tea. They stopped in the doorway, sensing the emotional atmosphere in the room. Jack turned to the girls, a kind smile on his face despite the tears in his eyes. Amy, Lisa, your grandma and I have a lot to talk about, but I want you to know that from now on, you don't have to worry anymore. I'll take care of everything. The twins ran to hug Jack, tears of relief and gratitude in their eyes. Betty watched the scene, her heart overflowing with emotion. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, one without fear. Jack spent the next few hours listening to Betty fill in the missing pieces of the past 20 years of separation. The twins, exhausted from the night's adventures, fell asleep on a nearby sofa, their hands still clasped together. As dawn began to filter through the worn curtains, Jack made a decision. He stood up from the chair by Betty's bed, stretching after hours of intense conversation. Betty, he said softly, his voice filled with resolve, I'll take care of everything. First, we'll get you to the best hospital in the city today. Then, I'm going to investigate what happened with my father. The truth needs to come out. Betty looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and concern. Jack, are you sure? This could change everything for you. Your life. Your company. Jack nodded, his face set with a determination that reminded Betty of the brave little boy he used to be. "I'm sure it's time to right the wrongs of the past. I can't keep living a lie, building my life on a foundation of secrets and crimes." He walked over to the sofa, gently waking Amy and Lisa. The girls blinked sleepily, but brightened at the sight of Jack. "Girls," he said, kneeling to their level, "let's get Grandma to the hospital now. She's going to get the best possible treatment. Are you ready for a new adventure?" Amy and Lisa nodded enthusiastically, hope shining in their tired eyes. Jack felt his heart swell with a protective love for these children who, in a single night, had changed his life in ways he could never have imagined. While Jack made calls to arrange an ambulance and admission to the hospital, Betty watched the scene with tears in her eyes. After years of living in fear and uncertainty, she finally felt that a new chapter was beginning. The guilt she felt for keeping the girls away from a better life ate at her, but seeing the kindness in Jack's eyes made her think that maybe, just maybe, the universe was finally working in her favor. When the ambulance arrived, Jack helped load Betty onto the gurney. The twins, hand in hand, followed close behind, their faces a mixture of worry and hope. Jack embraced them, silently promising he would do everything in his power to protect them and give them the life they deserved. Before leaving the apartment, Jack paused for a moment, looking around. This small space, so different from the luxurious world he was used to, had changed his life in a single night. He made a silent promise that no matter what happened next, he would never forget this lesson in humility, love, and courage. As the ambulance pulled away, carrying Betty toward an uncertain but hopeful future, Jack followed by car with Amy and Lisa. The sun rose on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, as though announcing a new beginning for them all. In the back seat, Amy and Lisa quickly fell asleep, exhausted by the night's events. Jack watched them in the rearview mirror, marveling at the strength and resilience of these little girls who had faced so much in their short lives. His thoughts then turned to his father, the company and the life he had built. He knew the days ahead would be difficult. Investigating his father's actions meant possibly destroying the Anderson family legacy. It meant facing the press, the shareholders, maybe even lawsuits. But then Jack looked again at the sleeping girls and at the ambulance ahead, carrying Betty. He thought of Betty's courage, living all those years in fear to protect her granddaughters. He thought of Amy and Lisa's determination, two young children willing to face an adult world to save their grandma. And in that moment, Jack knew he was doing the right thing. No matter the cost, no matter the consequences, the truth had to come out, and he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. With a deep sigh, Jack gripped the steering wheel, feeling the weight of responsibility but also a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a very long time, he wasn't just the heir to the Anderson empire or a billionaire playboy. He was Jack, the boy Betty had raised to be brave and honest. As the car headed toward the hospital, Jack made a silent promise. He would fix the mistakes of the past. He would protect Betty and the girls. And in doing so, perhaps he would rediscover the man he was always meant to be. The day was just beginning, and with it, a new journey was unfolding, a journey of redemption, truth, and love. When they arrived at the hospital, a medical team was already waiting, alerted by Jack's call. Betty was quickly taken for tests, while Jack handled the necessary paperwork, using his influence to secure the best possible care. Amy and Lisa, still sleepy, clung to Jack's hands, their eyes wide at the bustling hospital environment. Jack reassured them, promising everything would be fine. While they waited for news, Jack made a few more calls. First to his personal assistant, instructing him to cancel all upcoming appointments. Then to his trusted lawyer, scheduling an urgent meeting. Hours passed. The girls dozed off again in the waiting room chairs, while Jack paced back and forth, his mind swirling with everything he had discovered and everything that still needed to be done. Finally, the attending physician came out. "Mr. Anderson, may we speak about Ms. Betty's condition?" Jack nodded, glancing quickly at the sleeping twins before following the doctor. "Her condition is serious, but it's not irreversible," the doctor explained. "With the right treatment, there's a good chance of a full recovery. But it will be a lengthy and expensive process. Money is not an issue, Jack replied firmly. Do whatever it takes. Returning to the waiting room, Jack found Amy and Lisa awake, their little faces anxious for news. Your grandma is going to be okay, he assured them, kneeling to their eye level. It'll take time, but she'll get better. I promise. The girls hugged him tightly, tears of relief spilling down their cheeks. Jack felt his heart ache, more determined than ever to protect this small family that fate had brought into his life. As the sun set on what had been one of the longest, most transformative days of Jack's life, he stared out of the hospital window at the city sprawling below. Somewhere out there was his father, unaware of the storm that was coming. Somewhere out there lay the secrets and lies that had shaped the last 2 decades. But here, in this hospital room, with 2 sleeping little girls by his side and Betty bravely fighting for her life upstairs, Jack knew he had found something far more precious than any fortune or corporate empire. He had found a chance at redemption, an opportunity to do what was right. And as night fell over the city, Jack Anderson made a silent promise to the stars that were just beginning to appear. He would fix the mistakes of the past, no matter the cost. He would protect Betty and the girls, giving them the life they deserved. And, in the process, he would become the man he was always meant to be. Jack sat between Amy and Lisa, one hand gently stroking each girl's hair, his eyes fixed on the horizon, ready to face whatever dawn might bring. 3 days after reuniting with Betty, Jack Anderson stood before the imposing gates of his family's mansion. The place that had once been his home now felt cold and distant, as though it belonged to a life that was no longer his. With a deep breath, Jack walked through the meticulously kept gardens. Each step toward the main house made his heart beat faster. He knew that the conversation he was about to have with his father would change everything. The housekeeper, who had worked for the Andersons for decades, opened the door. Her eyes widened slightly at seeing Jack, not used to unannounced visits from the young heir. "Mr. Jack," she said, her voice betraying mild surprise. "Your father is in the study. Shall I announce you?" Jack shook his head. "No need, Mrs. Thompson." "Thank you." He walked through the mansion's corridors, passing expensive artworks and valuable antiques. Each object seemed to scream of wealth and power, but to Jack, in that moment, they felt hollow. He stopped before the heavy oak door of his father's study. For a moment he hesitated, hand hovering over the doorknob. Then, gathering all his courage, he knocked twice and entered. Robert Anderson sat behind his imposing mahogany desk, reading glasses perched on the tip of his nose, poring over documents. He looked up, surprised to see his son. "Jack, I wasn't expecting you today. Is something wrong?" Jack closed the door behind him and stepped into the study. "Yes, Dad. Something has happened. Something we should have talked about a long time ago." Robert removed his glasses, frowning at his son's serious tone. "What are you talking about?" Jack sat in the chair across from the desk, meeting his father's gaze. "I'm talking about Betty, about the night you fired her, about the fraud scheme she overheard by accident." Robert's face went visibly pale. For a moment, he looked much older and more tired than the powerful businessman the world knew. How did you find out about that?" "I found Betty," Jack replied, his voice resolute. "She told me everything." Robert stood up abruptly, walking to the window overlooking the gardens. He stood there for a few moments, hands clasped behind his back, before turning to face his son again. "Jack, you have to understand, business sometimes requires tough decisions. What Betty heard, what I did, it was to protect our family, our company." Jack felt a surge of disappointment and anger rise within him. "Protect? Dad, you threatened an innocent woman. You forced her to live in fear for 2 decades, Robert tried to argue, his voice taking on the persuasive tone he used in important negotiations. "Son, the business world is complex. Sometimes, for the greater good, we have to do things that aren't conventional." "Conventional?" Jack nearly shouted, standing up. "Fraud isn't unconventional, Dad. It's a crime." The 2 men stared at each other, tension thick in the air. Robert seemed to be fighting internally, decades of justifications and rationalizations crumbling in the face of the obvious disappointment in his son's eyes. "You don't understand, Jack," Robert said, his voice lower now. "I built all this from nothing. When the opportunity came to expand to secure our future, I couldn't pass it up." Jack shook his head, incredulous. "At the cost of integrity, honesty, the values you always taught me to respect." Jack's words seemed to strike Robert like a blow. He staggered slightly, leaning on the desk. For the first time, Jack saw something he never imagined he would see on his father's face: shame. I'm sorry, Jack," Robert murmured, his voice breaking. "I truly am." To Jack's shock, tears began to roll down his father's cheeks. Robert Anderson, the business titan, the man Jack had always viewed as unshakable, was crying. "I never wanted things to go this far," Robert went on, sinking into his chair. "In the beginning, it was just a small misstep, but then it got bigger and bigger. And before I knew it, I was trapped in a web of lies I couldn't escape." Jack felt his anger subside, replaced by profound sadness. He moved closer to his father, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Dad, it's not too late to do the right thing." Robert looked up, meeting his son's gaze. "How, Jack? How can I fix this after all this time?" "Start by telling me everything," Jack replied, sitting down again. "The entire scheme, every detail." In the hours that followed, Robert confessed everything. The fraud scheme that began as minor accounting manipulation and grew into a multi-million-dollar operation. The bribes, offshore accounts, and forged documents. Jack listened in silence, his heart heavy with each new revelation. By the time Robert finished, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the study. The man before Jack was no longer the confident, powerful father he had always known. He was a broken man, consumed by guilt and regret. "I messed it all up, didn't I?" Robert asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jack took a deep breath before responding. "Yes, Dad, you did, but there's still a chance to set things right." Robert nodded slowly. "You're right, and I know what I have to do." He straightened in his chair, a spark of his old determination returning to his eyes. "I'm handing over the company to you, Jack. You've always been better than me, more principled. You can clear Anderson Corp's name." Jack was surprised by the offer. "Dad, are you sure?" "Absolutely," Robert replied. "It's time for me to retire, to face the consequences of my actions." And he hesitated for a moment. "I want to provide generous compensation to Betty and her granddaughters. It's the least I can do after everything I've caused." Jack felt a mix of emotions: relief that his father was finally doing the right thing, apprehension over the uncertain road ahead, and a strange sense of pride that Robert was taking responsibility for his mistakes. "I accept the responsibility, Dad," Jack said, his voice firm. "But it won't be easy. We'll have to be transparent, face potential lawsuits, rebuild shareholders and the public's trust." Robert nodded. "I know, and I'll stand by you throughout the process, ready to face the consequences of my actions." In the days that followed, events unfolded rapidly. Robert Anderson called a press conference, publicly announcing his retirement for personal reasons and a desire to spend more time with family. He introduced Jack as Anderson Corp's new CEO, praising his integrity and vision for the future. Behind the scenes, Jack worked tirelessly with a team of lawyers and accountants to fully uncover the fraud scheme and prepare for the inevitable investigations. He also made sure a generous financial settlement was directed to Betty and the twins, ensuring they would never have to worry about money again. When Jack officially took control of Anderson Corp, he did so with a mix of determination and humility. In his first speech as CEO, he promised a new era of transparency and integrity for the company. Anderson Corp was built on hard work and innovation, he told the employees gathered, but we also carry mistakes from the past. Today, I commit to correcting those mistakes, rebuilding trust, and leading this company with honesty and ethics. It won't be an easy journey, but together, we can make Anderson Corp a beacon of integrity in business. As Jack left the podium, under cautious yet hopeful applause from employees, he knew the road ahead would be challenging. But when he thought of Betty, of Amy and Lisa, and the remorseful, proud look in his father's eyes, Jack felt that, for the first time in a long while, he was on the right path. Jack was in his new office, gazing out the window at the city below. In his hands was an old photo, him as a child with Betty in the mansion's kitchen, both smiling as they baked cookies. Jack smiled at the picture, determined to honor the past and build a better future. The Anderson family's journey to redemption was just beginning. Memorial Hospital, known for its excellent medical care, was bustling when Jack Anderson arrived, carrying a bouquet of colorful flowers. He greeted the nurses by name as he headed to Betty's room, a routine that had become familiar over the past few weeks. Upon entering the room, Jack found Betty sitting up in bed, looking better than she had in days. Her face, previously pale and tired, now had a slight flush, and her eyes shone with renewed energy. "Jack!" Betty exclaimed, her face lighting up with a smile. "It's so good to see you." Jack placed the flowers in a vase beside the bed and sat in the nearby chair. "How are you feeling today, Betty?" "Better every day," she replied, adjusting herself in bed. "The doctors say the treatment is going well, but tell me, how are things at the company?" Jack smiled, admiring Betty's strength and concern, even in her situation. "Things are in transition," he answered, choosing his words carefully. "We're implementing a lot of ethical reforms. It's not easy, but it's necessary." Over the past few weeks, Jack had thrown himself into overhauling Anderson Corp. He hired a team of experts in corporate ethics and compliance, and together they were reviewing every aspect of the company's operations. "Yesterday, we announced our new transparency policy," Jack continued. "All contracts and transactions above a certain value will be published on our website, open to the public. Some shareholders aren't happy, but most understand it's the only way forward." Betty nodded, pride in her eyes. "You're doing the right thing, Jack. It can't be easy." "It's not," Jack admitted. "But surprisingly, my father has been a big help." Since his public retirement, Robert Anderson had devoted himself to advising Jack during the transition. His decades of business experience, combined with genuine remorse, had proven invaluable. "He's walked me through each department," Jack explained, pointing out problem areas, suggesting improvements. "It's like he's trying to fix every mistake he's ever made." Betty was silent for a moment, taking in the information. "He's changed a lot, hasn't he?" Jack nodded. "Yes, he has. In fact," he hesitated, not wanting to stress Betty. "He mentioned he'd like to come visit you if you're okay with that." Betty looked surprised but not upset by the idea. I think I'd like that," she finally said. Before they could continue talking, there was a knock on the door. Amy and Lisa entered, still wearing their new Oakwood elementary uniforms. "Grandma!" they shouted in unison, rushing to hug Betty. Jack watched with a smile. After the charity auction, he had insisted on enrolling the twins in Oakwood Elementary, one of the best schools in the city. Initially, Betty had resisted, worried about the drastic change for the girls, but Jack convinced her it was the best path for their future. "How was school today?" Betty asked, embracing her granddaughters. "It was amazing," Amy exclaimed. "We had a science class and did a volcano experiment. And in art class, we painted with watercolors," Lisa added. "The teacher said my painting was really good." As the girls excitedly recounted their day, Jack couldn't help but notice how they seemed to be flourishing. The fear and worry that once shadowed their eyes had given way to genuine childhood joy. After a few minutes, a nurse came in to check Betty's vitals. Jack took the opportunity to say goodbye. "I have to get back to the office," he said, standing up. "We have an important meeting about the company's new core values." Betty nodded understandingly. "Go on, dear. And thank you for everything." Jack leaned down to kiss Betty on the forehead and hugged the twins before leaving. In the hospital corridor, he paused, taking a deep breath. The gratitude in Betty's eyes and the girls' happiness were a constant reminder of why he was working so hard to change things. Back at Anderson Corp, Jack entered the packed conference room. Executives, managers, and representatives from various departments were gathered to discuss and finalize the company's new core values. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jack began, taking his place at the head of the table, "we're here today to redefine who we are as a company. This isn't just about pretty words on a plaque. It's a genuine commitment to ethics, transparency, and social responsibility." In the hours that followed, the group debated each point. Jack insisted on values like integrity over profit and transparency in all operations. Some of the older executives resisted, arguing that such policies could hurt the company's competitiveness. But Jack stood his ground. "I understand your concerns, Weiss," he said at a crucial moment in the discussion, "but we can't operate the old way anymore. The cost, not just financially, but morally, is too great. We'll prove that it's possible to be both successful and ethical." By the end of the meeting, a new set of corporate values was approved. Jack knew implementing them would be a challenge, but he was determined to make Anderson Corp a role model for ethical business. Meanwhile, at Memorial Hospital, Robert Anderson hesitated outside Betty's room. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind countless times, but now that he was there, the words seemed to escape him. Finally, summoning courage, he knocked softly and stepped inside. Betty was alone, reading a book. She looked up, and for a moment, both were silent, the weight of 2 decades of secrets and fear lingering between them. "Betty," Robert began, his voice trembling, I came to ask for your forgiveness." Betty set aside her book, watching the man before her. The powerful Robert Anderson she once knew seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone older, more humble. "Please sit down, Robert," she said gently. Robert sat, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "What I did to you, the fear I caused, it's unforgivable. But I need you to know how sorry I am. Every day since then has been torment." Betty listened in silence as Robert poured out his guilt, confessing the burden he had carried for years and the emptiness he felt even at the height of his corporate success. "I understand if you can't forgive me," he concluded, tears in his eyes. "But I want you to know I'll do everything in my power to make it right, for you and for the girls." Betty remained silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "Robert, forgiveness isn't something given easily. What you did affected not just me, but also my granddaughters. It will take time for those wounds to heal." Robert nodded, accepting her words. "But," Betty went on, "the fact that you're here, admitting your mistakes and trying to make things right, that's a start. I can't promise immediate forgiveness, but I'm willing to give us a chance to maybe start over." Betty's words, though not a complete absolution, gave Robert a glimmer of hope. He knew he had a long road ahead, but he was determined to prove, through actions, that his remorse was genuine. As the sun set over the city, a feeling of change was in the air. At the hospital, Betty rested, reflecting on the unexpected visit from Robert. At Oakwood Elementary, Amy and Lisa stayed for after-school activities, making new friends and discovering new talents. At Anderson Corp, Jack worked late, determined to turn the company into a shining example of ethical business. A new phase had begun for them all. The path ahead would be challenging, full of obstacles and difficult moments, but there was also hope, the promise of redemption, and the chance to build something better from the ruins of the past. As night fell over the city, each of them, Betty, Robert, Jack, Amy, and Lisa, looked to the future with a mix of apprehension and optimism. The winds of change were blowing, bringing with them the promise of brighter days to come. Morning dawned clear and full of promise as Betty was finally discharged from Memorial Hospital. After months of intensive treatment, she was ready to go home, healthier and stronger than she'd been in years. Jack, Amy, and Lisa waited eagerly at the hospital entrance, wide smiles on their faces. "Grandma!" the twins shouted in unison, running to hug Betty as she appeared in the doorway, pushed in a wheelchair by a nurse. Betty laughed, her eyes shining with tears of joy as she embraced her granddaughters. "My darlings, I missed you so much." Jack approached, bending down to give Betty a gentle kiss on the cheek. "Welcome back, Betty. We're all so happy to have you home again." The ride back to the apartment was filled with lively conversation and laughter. The twins couldn't stop talking about school, their new friends, and all the things they wanted to show their grandma. Betty listened with a smile, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. When they arrived home, Betty was surprised to see that the apartment had been completely renovated. The old furniture had been replaced with new, comfortable pieces, the walls painted with cheerful colors, and the kitchen equipped with modern appliances. "Jack," Betty whispered, moved. "You didn't have to do all this." Jack smiled, placing a gentle hand on Betty's shoulder. Actually, it wasn't me. It was my father's idea. Betty looked surprised by the revelation. Since Robert's visit at the hospital, they had spoken briefly on the phone, but the relationship was still fragile, weighed down by the past. Before Betty could fully process this information, there was a knock on the door. Jack opened it, revealing Robert Anderson, looking nervous and holding a large box. "May I come in?" he asked hesitantly. Betty nodded, still somewhat dazed. Robert entered, placing the box on the kitchen table. "Betty," he began, his voice trembling, "I know nothing I do can completely erase the past, but I hope this can be a start." He opened the box, revealing legal documents and a key. "What is this?" Betty asked, confused. Robert took a deep breath before replying. "It's the deed to a small storefront downtown. I thought you might like to open your own bakery. Your cookies have always been the best I've ever tasted." The silence that followed was broken by the twins' excited cries. "Grandma is going to have a cookie shop." Betty was speechless, looking from Robert to Jack, and then to the twins. Finally, she turned to Robert. I don't know what to say." "Say you accept," Jack interjected softly. "Dad and I talked about it. It's an opportunity for you to do something you love, Betty, and the girls can help after school." Tears welled in Betty's eyes. I accept. Thank you, Robert. This means so much." In the weeks that followed, Betty's bakery began to take shape. Robert personally oversaw the shop's renovation, ensuring everything was done to Betty's specifications. Jack handled the legal and financial aspects of the business, while Amy and Lisa spent hours testing new recipes with their grandma. The grand opening of the bakery was an event that brought the whole community together. The small space was packed with people eager to try Betty's famous cookies. The twins, wearing matching aprons, helped serve customers, their faces aglow with pride. Robert stood at the back of the shop, watching the scene with a mixture of joy and regret. Jack approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You did a good thing, Dad," he said softly. Robert nodded, his eyes wet with emotion. "I just wish I could go back and do things differently from the start." "We can't change the past," Jack replied, "but we can learn from it and do better moving forward, and that's exactly what you're doing now." In the months that followed, Betty's bakery became more than just a bakery. It became the heart of the community. People of all ages gathered there, drawn not just by the delicious treats, but by the welcoming atmosphere Betty created. Amy and Lisa spent their afternoons after school helping out, developing not only baking skills, but also learning about business and customer interaction. They thrived, their personalities blooming like flowers in the sun. Robert, initially hesitant to get too involved, started spending more time at the bakery. At first, he'd make quick visits to see if Betty needed anything, but soon he found himself spending entire afternoons there, chatting with customers, organizing community events, and most importantly, rebuilding his relationship with Betty and the twins. One day, as Betty and Robert sat at a small table in the back of the shop after closing time, Betty noticed something different about him. "You seem lighter, Robert," she remarked. Robert smiled, a genuine smile rarely seen in his days as a ruthless businessman. "I feel lighter, Betty. For the first time in decades, I feel like I'm doing something truly meaningful." Betty nodded in understanding. Forgiveness is powerful, isn't it? Not just for the one forgiven, but for the one who forgives as well. Robert looked at her, surprised. You forgave me?" Betty was silent for a moment before answering. "Forgiveness is a process, Robert. It doesn't happen overnight, but yes, I'm on the road to fully forgiving you. Seeing how you've changed, how you've worked to fix things, it makes forgiveness easier." Betty's words touched Robert deeply. He felt tears forming in his eyes, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. Meanwhile, Jack was balancing his new life as CEO of Anderson Corp. With his increasingly present role in Betty's and the twins' lives. He implemented radical changes at the company, focusing on ethical practices and social responsibility. The transition wasn't easy. Some shareholders and older executives resisted, but Jack stood firm in his vision. One day, during a particularly tense board meeting, Jack received a text message from Amy. Grandma just made a new chocolate cookie recipe. You have to try it." That simple message made him smile, reminding him of what truly mattered. He wrapped up the meeting with renewed determination, knowing that every ethical decision he made was building a better future, not just for Anderson Corp, but for Amy, Lisa, and all children who deserved a fair and honest world. At school, Amy and Lisa excelled not only academically, but in extracurricular activities too. Amy discovered a talent for debate, often discussing social issues with a maturity beyond her years. Lisa, on the other hand, immersed herself in the arts, her paintings capturing the essence of Betty's bakery and the community around it. One Saturday, while the family was gathered at the bakery for a late lunch, Betty looked around with a full heart. Robert was helping the twins decorate cookies, laughing in a way she had never seen him laugh before. Jack was animatedly talking with regular customers about a new community project Anderson Corp was sponsoring. "Who would have thought," Betty murmured to herself, "that so much fear and secrecy could yield something so beautiful?" The transformation didn't stop with the family. Betty's generosity, shown through donating food to the less fortunate and the warm welcome she offered to everyone entering the shop, began to change the neighborhood itself. Other local merchants, inspired by Betty's Bakery, started their own community initiatives. Robert, motivated by his experiences in the bakery, got involved in philanthropic projects. He used his contacts and resources to set up financial education programs for low-income youth and initiatives to support small entrepreneurs. "I spent most of my life accumulating wealth," he confided in Jack one day. "Now, I see that real wealth lies in making a difference in others' lives." Jack observed his father's transformation with a mix of pride and admiration. The cold, calculating man he had known for so long had given way to someone kinder, more compassionate. Family bonds, once tense and fragile, grew stronger each day. Sunday nights at Betty's Bakery became a sacred tradition, the whole family gathering to share dinner, stories, and of course, Betty's delicious treats. During one of these dinners, Amy surprised everyone with a question. "Grandma," she said, her voice serious, "do you think any of this would have happened if we hadn't gone to Grandpa Robert's fancy party?" Silence fell around the table as everyone reflected on the question. Betty looked at Robert, then at Jack, and finally at the twins. "You know, dear," she answered gently, "sometimes the hardest things we face lead us to the most beautiful places. What matters isn't how we start our journey, but how we choose to continue it." Jack raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said, "and to second chances." "To family and second chances," they all echoed, glasses clinking in the air. As the evening went on, filled with laughter, stories, and the unmistakable aroma of Betty's cookies, it was clear to everyone that the bonds that now united them were stronger than any hardship they had faced. Their healing and reconciliation journey was far from over, but each day brought new opportunities to grow, forgive, and love. And at the center of it all was the little bakery, a living testament to how love, perseverance, and forgiveness can transform lives and entire communities. Betty's Bakery was more than a business. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that it's never too late for a new beginning. As night wore on, the family remained gathered at Betty's Bakery, enjoying each other's company in the warm atmosphere Betty had created. The aroma of freshly baked cookies lingered in the air, blending with the sound of laughter and lively conversation. Robert, sitting in a corner watching the scene, felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He looked at Betty, who was teaching the twins a new cookie decorating technique, and at Jack, who was enthusiastically discussing future plans for the bakery. In that moment, Robert truly understood the value of what he had gained, not financially, but in human connections and personal redemption. When it was finally time to close the shop, everyone pitched in to clean up, working together like a true family. As they left, each took with them not only a box of cookies, but also the comforting sense of belonging and the silent promise of even better days ahead. Betty was the last to leave, pausing for a moment to look at the Betty's Bakery sign illuminated against the night sky. With a serene smile, she locked the door, knowing that tomorrow would bring a new day filled with possibility, love, and of course, more delicious cookies to share with her newly discovered family and community. Anderson Corp was undergoing a remarkable transformation under Jack's leadership. The introduction of new ethical policies, which had initially caused unease among some shareholders, was beginning to yield surprising results. One sunny morning, Jack entered his office, eager to review the latest financial reports. Opening the file on his computer, a smile spread across his face. The projections were better than he'd hoped. "Sarah," he called to his assistant over the intercom, "could you please schedule a board meeting for this afternoon? We have good news to share." As he prepared for the meeting, Jack reflected on the past months. The shift to more ethical practices had not been easy. There had been resistance, doubts, and even some resignations from executives who couldn't align with the company's new vision. But Jack remained steadfast in his conviction. The meeting room was packed when Jack walked in. Anxious faces regarded him, a mix of hope and apprehension in the air. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jack began, his voice steady and confident, "I'm pleased to inform you that our new ethics policy has not only kept our company stable, but actually driven our growth." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Jack continued, presenting charts and figures showing a significant increase in investor confidence, an improvement in the company's reputation, and consequently, growth in sales and partnerships. "But that's not all," Jack went on. "Our new social responsibility initiatives have attracted exceptional talent, people who are not only skilled in their fields, but who also share our values and vision for the future." While the meeting continued, across town, Robert Anderson was at a local community center, involved in a very different kind of work than his former CEO days. "So, Mrs. Johnson," he said, sitting beside an elderly woman, "let's review your monthly budget again. I see you've managed to reduce some expenses since our last talk. That's excellent." Robert had discovered a new purpose in volunteer work, especially in financial education programs for struggling communities. His business experience, combined with his genuine desire to help, was making a real difference in people's lives. After spending the afternoon advising several community members, Robert sat for a moment, exhausted but deeply satisfied. His phone buzzed with a message from Jack. "Good news about the company, Dad. Shall we have dinner tonight to talk?" Robert smiled, feeling a surge of pride for his son. "Of course," he replied. "I can't wait to hear all about it." That evening, father and son met at a modest restaurant they used to frequent. As they waited for their food, Jack shared the good news about Anderson Corp. "It's incredible, Dad," Jack said, eyes shining with excitement. "We're proving it's possible to be successful and ethical at the same time. In fact, our ethics are becoming our biggest competitive advantage." Robert listened attentively, feeling both proud and regretful. "You're doing a fantastic job, son. Better than I ever did." Jack noticed the sadness in his father's voice. "Dad, the past is the past. What matters is what we're doing now. Speaking of which, how was your day at the community center?" Robert's face lit up as he shared stories about the people he had helped. Jack watched the transformation in his father. The man who once cared only about profits and power now found genuine joy in helping others. As they talked, both reflected on how their relationship had changed. The tensions and expectations of the past had been replaced by mutual respect and a deeper love. "You know, Jack," Robert said, his voice serious, "I've been thinking. With the company's success and everything, maybe it's time we do something big to celebrate. Not just our professional achievements, but our family, our journey." Jack smiled, thinking of Amy and Lisa and how proud they were of their family's story. "I think it's a great idea, Dad. The girls would be thrilled." In the days that followed, Jack continued to lead Anderson Corp with a blend of innovation and integrity. He implemented new ethical training programs for all employees, formed partnerships with non-profit organizations, and even started a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs from underprivileged communities. News of Anderson Corp's success began to spread. Business journals published articles on the ethical revolution led by Jack Anderson. Invitations to speak at conferences poured in, everyone wanting to learn how the company had transformed its culture and achieved success. At one of these conferences, a young entrepreneur approached Jack after his speech. "Mr. Anderson," the young man said, eyes shining with admiration, "your story, the story of your company, is so inspiring. How did you find the courage to make such drastic changes?" Jack pondered for a moment, recalling two small girls selling cookies at a lavish party. "Sometimes," he replied with a smile, "the inspiration to do what's right comes from the most unexpected places. The important thing is recognizing it when it appears and having the courage to act." Meanwhile, Robert carried on with his work at the community center. He had expanded the financial education program and was even considering starting a foundation to support small entrepreneurs. One day, as he walked down the hallway of the center, Robert overheard two women talking. "Did you see that article about Anderson Corp?" one asked. "It's amazing how they've changed. My son got an internship there, and he says it's the best work environment he's ever seen." Robert felt his heart swell with pride, not for the company's financial success, but for the positive impact it was making on people's lives. As days passed, the idea of a grand family celebration began to take shape. Jack and Robert worked together on the plans, deciding it would not just be a party, but a chance to gather friends, employees, and community members who had been part of their journey. One night, as they finalized the celebration details, Jack looked at his father and saw tears in his eyes. "Dad, are you okay?" Robert wiped his eyes, smiling. "More than okay, son. I'm just grateful. For you, for our family, for this second chance we have. You know, for years I thought success was about having more money, more power. But now I see that real success lies in the lives we touch, the good we do." Jack felt a lump in his throat. "I know, Dad. I feel the same." In that moment, father and son shared an embrace, years of tension and misunderstanding finally dissolving, replaced by mutual love and respect. As the date of the celebration drew near, anticipation filled the air. Anderson Corp was thriving, not just financially, but as a positive force in the community. Robert had found new purpose in his life, and the Anderson family, once torn apart by secrets and ambition, was now more united than ever. Love and forgiveness had become the core values that defined the Andersons, not just in their personal lives, but in how they did business, treated others, and saw the world. As Jack got ready for bed on the eve of the big celebration, he reflected on the incredible journey his family had taken. From an empire built on secrets and greed, they had created something truly special, a company that made a difference, a united family bound by love, and a legacy they could be proud of. Smiling, Jack drifted off to sleep, eager for tomorrow and the new horizons awaiting the Anderson family. 1 year had passed since that fateful night when two little girls sneaked into a luxurious party, setting off a chain of events that would forever change the lives of the Anderson family. Now, the Anderson mansion was once again filled with guests, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Colorful balloons decorated the vast garden, tables draped in white cloth held floral centerpieces, and the air was filled with laughter and excited chatter. In the center of it all, a large banner proclaimed, "Happy birthday, Amy and Lisa." The twins, now turning 6, ran back and forth in festive party dresses fluttering in the breeze, greeting guests with radiant smiles. Betty, appearing years younger and full of life, watched them proudly, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. Jack T, wearing a casual suit, chatted animatedly with a group of executives and business partners. His face showed a blend of professional pride and personal joy as he shared the latest ethical initiatives at Anderson Corp. "Our mentorship program for young entrepreneurs in struggling communities is already showing incredible results," he explained. "We're not just nurturing talent, but creating real social change." Nearby, Robert Anderson, the man once known for his relentless pursuit of profit, was now seated at a table, surrounded by a diverse group of community members. He listened attentively to their stories, offering advice and encouragement. "Mr. Anderson," a young mother said, grasping Robert's hand gratefully, "the financial education program you started changed my life. Now I can provide a better future for my son." Robert smiled, feeling a wave of emotion unlike anything he'd experienced during his years as a corporate magnate. "The pleasure is all mine," he replied softly. You are the real heroes here. In the center of the garden, a large table displayed an impressive assortment of cookies and treats from Betty's bakery. The delicious aroma drew guests of all ages, each eager to sample Betty's famous creations. Amy and Lisa, proud of their grandma and the bakery's success, guided guests around the table, explaining each flavor with childlike excitement. "This is Grandma's chocolate cookie with walnuts," Lisa told a group of wide-eyed children. "It's Uncle Jack's favorite." Amy pointed to a special cookie in the center of the table. It was bigger than the others, decorated with colorful icing forming a heart. "And this," she said with a mischievous smile, "is the forgiveness cookie. Grandma made it to celebrate our family." The forgiveness cookie quickly became the party's main topic. Guests gathered around the table, curious to hear the story behind it. Betty, with Amy and Lisa by her side, shared the Anderson family's journey with a mix of emotion and gratitude. "This cookie," she explained, holding it gently, "represents everything our family has learned over the past year. The crunchy shell symbolizes the hardships we faced, but the soft, sweet inside symbolizes the love and forgiveness we found." As Betty spoke, Jack and Robert approached, forming a small circle around her. 3 generations of Andersons, united by more than blood, by a shared journey of redemption and love. Jack placed a hand on his father's shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes about how far their relationship had come. "Dad," he said, emotion filling his voice, "thank you for having the courage to change, for showing us that it's never too late to do what's right." Robert, tears in his eyes, hugged his son. "Thank you for giving me this second chance, Jack." "And thank you all," he said, looking at Betty and the twins, "for teaching me the true meaning of family and success." The party continued well into the evening, celebrating not only Amy and Lisa's birthday, but also a reunited, strengthened family. Guests from all parts of the Andersons' lives, company executives, bakery customers, community members, mingled, united by the family's inspiring story. Later, when the moon was high in the sky and the children were starting to yawn, the Anderson family gathered for a private moment away from the guests. "Grandma," Amy said, settling into Betty's arms, "tell us again how it all started." Betty smiled, exchanging affectionate glances with Jack and Robert. "Well, my loves, it all began with 2 brave little girls who decided to sell cookies at a very fancy party." As Betty narrated the now familiar but always thrilling story, each family member reflected on their own journey over the past year. Jack thought about how Anderson Corp had transformed, becoming a respected model of ethical business nationwide. He remembered the challenges, the sleepless nights working on new policies, but also the satisfaction of seeing the company thrive in a way that benefited not just shareholders, but the entire community. Robert listened to the story, feeling a mix of regret and gratitude. The man he had been a year ago seemed a stranger now. Through his volunteer work and reconnection with the family, he had found a purpose and a happiness no material wealth could ever provide. Betty, surrounded by her family, could hardly believe the transformation in her life. From living in fear and hiding, she was now a successful business owner, respected and loved in her community. Her bakery wasn't just a business, it was a symbol of hope and second chances. Amy and Lisa, though too young to fully grasp the scale of events, felt the love and unity that now pervaded their family. They had grown not only in age, but in understanding and compassion. When Betty finished the story, there was a moment of contemplative silence. Finally, Jack spoke, his voice gentle yet firm. "You know," he began, looking at each family member in turn, "a year ago, I thought I knew all about success and family. But you taught me that real success is in the bonds we form, the lives we touch." Robert nodded, adding, "And that it's never too late to change, to do what's right. Every day is a new opportunity to be better." Betty smiled, taking the twins' hands. "And most importantly, we learned that love and forgiveness are the most powerful forces there are. They can heal wounds, tear down walls, and bring hearts together." Amy and Lisa, though tired, gave wide smiles. "And cookies can change the world," Amy added, making everyone laugh. As the night drew to a close and the last guests said their farewells, the Anderson family remained together, gazing at the stars. The future, once uncertain and bleak, now shone with promise and possibility. Jack knew Anderson Corp would continue to grow and make a difference in both the business world and beyond. Robert looked forward to expanding his community programs, touching even more lives. Betty planned to open a second branch of Betty's Bakery, spreading her message of love and forgiveness to an even wider audience. And Amy and Lisa, the little catalysts for all this change, were just beginning their journey, with a bright future ahead of them, nurtured by the love and support of their newly reformed family. As they prepared to head home, each family member carried not only memories of a wonderful night, but also the certainty that, together, they could face any challenge the future might bring. The forgiveness cookie, now a cherished symbol of the Andersons' journey, remained at the center of the table. A sweet, tangible reminder that love, honesty, and the courage to change can truly transform lives. And so, with hearts full and spirits high, the Anderson family welcomed the next chapter of their story, eager for the new adventures, challenges, and moments of joy that lay ahead. The future had never looked so bright or so sweet,